Hey there, storytellers, and welcome to Author Culture, a quick dive into stories, how they connect with readers, and how we can build sustainable success as authors. I'm Janeen Ippolito, and I am so glad you're here. Each week, we start with a story, we explore it a bit, we pull out a quick tip, action item, or bit of encouragement, and then we send you on your way to keep doing your awesome reading and writing. And if that sounds fantastic to you and you want to keep the jam session going, please make sure that you subscribe on YouTube and hit that notification bell. Also subscribe on Spotify, on Apple iTunes, on Substack, or wherever else you listen to this podcast. And for today's story, we're finishing up our two-part series on 5 impossible reasons why The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe works even when it shouldn't. Last week, we started off with 2 reasons. The fact that this book is a portal fantasy, which can be more difficult to sell, and also the fact that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a wonderful, marvelous, messy mashup of mythologies, which is generally frowned on in world-building terms, but can really work. And C.S. Lewis, the author of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, really nailed it. So if you haven't caught the previous episode, you can hop over and give it a quick listen. And otherwise, let's dive into the final 3 possible reasons why The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis works even when it really shouldn't. Now, the third impossible reason why The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe works when it really shouldn't comes down to the saga of it even getting written and finished. You may be aware that C.S. Lewis was part of the Inklings, and this kind of casual, friendly, yet sometimes intense writing and creativity and critique group he had could be very encouraging, but they could also be some of his toughest critics. Now, first of all, C.S. Lewis started writing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in 1939, and he didn't finish it until 1949. And at any point during that time, the Inklings might have said, Lewis, maybe you should just hop over to another project already. Maybe this one just isn't fit to be published. And in fact, an early draft of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which featured 4 children named Anne, Martin, Rose, and Peter, did not get any positive reaction from his writing group at all. Lewis said in a letter, "It was by the unanimous verdict of my friends so bad that I destroyed it." J.R.R. Tolkien, in particular, was critical of it. So this whole idea that Lewis just had these book besties that showered this book with praise and adoration and everything, no, that wasn't really the story here. Which I mean is okay, because with critique groups, it isn't just about getting all the adoration and praise and encouragement. Having that iron sharpening the iron can really be helpful. But also, sometimes with writer friends, it's a lot about the cross-promotion and the collaboration and people just loving each other's stories and promoting each other's stories. Well, in the case of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, one of the other most successful Inklings actually really didn't like this book at all. And of course, I'm referencing that particular critic, again, J.R.R. Tolkien, also known as the author of The Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Silmarillion, and that whole Middle-earth verse. Tolkien hated The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He didn't like the didactic prose. He thought it was too teachy. He thought it was too obvious. He didn't like the allegorical moments at all. He thought it was too direct and, again, too obvious, even though Lewis himself was like, well, it's not a one-to-one allegory, it's more of a supposition or a what-if story. And Tolkien was genuinely offended by those crazy mythology mashups and how Lewis would just throw things in there. Now, if you know anything about Tolkien, he really went all in on building his world. He is one of the world-building gurus, one of the world-building experts, one of those people who just spent years and years perfecting his world, sometimes at the expense of actually writing his stories. So it kind of makes sense that someone who would take his world-building so seriously and want all those little, pieces in perfect places might be a little bit offended by Lewis just going, whee, let's just put this in here and that in here and this in here. And the thing is, Tolkien and Lewis both really enjoyed mythology and ancient stories. They just came at it completely different ways and had different perspectives on it. So even though Tolkien and Lewis both went on to success with their respective fantasy projects, this wasn't really that great cross-promotional reciprocity kind of author friendship. And the interesting thing is, C.S. Lewis was actually a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings books. He was a major encourager of Tolkien through the whole process of getting those books written. He also left glowing reviews of the Lord of the Rings books, and Tolkien does not, in fact, believes he cannot reciprocate because he doesn't like the Chronicles of Narnia, and he actually didn't like Lewis's space trilogy either. Just a bit awkward, you know? But sometimes this is life. Lewis got his book done. He got plenty of good positive feedback from other inklings in his circle. He got really good, helpful critiques. And even though one of his most successful fellow critique partners absolutely didn't like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, did not give it the glowing reviews, that's okay. He still went forward, and the book still had a lot of success on its own. And for the fourth impossible reason why The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe works, C.S. Lewis did not set out to write a 7-book series. He didn't create some vast story Bible or compendium or create these giant character sheets. Again, it was kind of the opposite of Tolkien. To quote from Lewis's 1957 reply to a letter from an American fan, "The series was not planned beforehand. When I wrote The Lion, I did not know I was going to write any more. Then I wrote P. Caspian as a sequel and still didn't think there would be any more. And then when I had done The Voyage, I felt quite sure it would be the last, but I found I was wrong." First of all, in my professional opinion, because Lewis had this focus of, well, this is the last book, that kind of element to his story writing and that element to his mindset actually allows each book in the Chronicles of Narnia to stand alone as a finished work. I would say that with the exception of The Last Battle, because that one really only has a lot of profound impact if you're familiar with the other books, or at least some of the other books, because of course The Last Battle is talking about the end of Narnia as a country and moving on to something bigger and better and greater that Aslan has in store for all of the characters we've seen. So The Last Battle really isn't a standalone. But the rest of the books can really stand alone on their own merit, because especially when Lewis finished them, he finished them in a very solid, fully resolved kind of way. And that's why it's really fun when you get to the next book and he's introducing new characters and he actually continues to reintroduce the story world and Friend's previous plots and things like that, because he's really writing these books and making them up as he goes along, and he's creating each story as its own little insular standalone, because in fact he didn't really plan on writing this many books to begin with. It might also explain why it's so easy to have favorites in the Chronicles of Narnia, because each book really does have its own distinctive style. So while Lewis evidently knew how to plot and write fiction books, before he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, he did write his space trilogy for adults. He wasn't hyper detailed. He wasn't a hyper planner. We might even call him a little bit closer to a pantser. And he just wrote and then discovered more stories and kept on writing. And with the success, the publisher just kept picking up the books and saying, yep, we'll publish that one. We'll publish that one. Oh, you have another? We're going to publish that one too. This is contrary to the recommendation of having as much of your series figured out ahead of time before you write it, and to continually be getting all those story ideas onto paper and keeping things organized as you continue writing your series. Now, putting my author coach hat on, as well as my experienced author hat on, I still say that the more that you have figured out about your series ahead of time, the better off you are going to be, and you're going to save yourself a lot of headaches. That being said, stories can really have a mind of their own. If you're contracted with a publisher, they might have other feedback along the process about what they want to see in the story or don't want to see in it that you have to take into consideration. And also, you may have one focus with the series, but your readers, upon responding to the first book, may have some different expectations that you can be open to, and perhaps tweak some of your original plans with your series to accommodate those readers and continue that conversation with them. I'm not saying like change everything to, agree with reader expectations, but that give and take is valid and totally fine. So have a plan, but also be flexible about it. And when in doubt, just keep writing the books and see what happens. After all, it did work for C.S. Lewis. And the fifth impossible reason that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe works when it really shouldn't is these books really are standalone books in a series. And I know I just mentioned that, but we're going to dive deeper into that because that actually has pretty interesting marketing implications. Now, here's the thing. If you talk to any kind of book marketing expert about series, at some point the concept of read-through comes up. Read-through measures how likely a reader is to pick up the next book after they finish the previous book in your series. So readers finish book 1, but how likely are they to pick up book 2? You can expect some reader attrition from one book to the next. Readers might enjoy book one, but not really get into book two. Or maybe they didn't enjoy book one enough to really want to do book two. Or maybe they do want to read book two, but they'll do it some other time. It'll be in their TBR pile, etc. But overall, the higher the series read through, the more profitable the series, because readers keep buying book after book after book, or they keep borrowing book after book after book in Kindle Unlimited or some other subscription program, in which case you still get the income from the page reads. There are various ways that you can structure books, write books, and craft descriptions to encourage series read through, which is considered a measurement of reader satisfaction and series profitability. So read through is kind of a big deal with series overall, especially in today's book marketing area. And then we have C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, in which he wrote the second book in the series first. That's right. If we're going by internal chronology, technically The Magician's Nephew takes place before The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Although if we're going by publication date, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is considered the first book. And there are strong debates over whether you should read The Chronicles of Narnia by publication date or by internal chronology date. So publication date would in fact be the order in which the books were initially published. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe would be first, whereas internal chronology date would be reading the books in terms of the chronology of how the books are laid out in the story world. In that case, The Magician's Nephew would be first, because in the story world, it deals with the creation of Narnia, and so that puts it first in terms of the history of Narnia. And there are a number of leading scholars who are really, really passionate that the publication date order is the way to read the books, even though The Magician's Nephew comes first. You have to start with the initial publication date. It's better for the read. It's better for literary criticism. It's better for appreciating the overall stories. You can definitely go and Google this, and people have written very long papers and even mentioned this as a chapter in their books about C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. But at the same time, when the Chronicles of Narnia were initially published, they were not numbered. The first American publisher, Macmillan, numbered them according to their original publication order, while some early British editions specified the internal chronological order, and then HarperCollins, when they took over the rights in 1984, also adopted the internal chronological order. So we're going back and forth and sideways, and we're not even numbering the books. This would absolutely not fly today. When you publish a series today, there's a general expectation that there is a certain specific order. And if the books are standalones, then they have to be completely cohesive, differentiated standalones. And even then, there is still kind of an expectation of the order in which you should read them. Whereas with the Chronicles of Narnia, you can read them out of order. You can hop in at pretty much any book in the series, again, with the exception of The Last Battle, which you could technically understand on its own, but it will not have the same impact to reading about the end of Narnia as a country if you have not previously experienced Narnia. But even in terms of going through the books as part of your English teaching curriculum, which I did, you can teach these books out of order. You can do an English lesson on a particular book, and it does not have to be The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You can start with The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. You can start with The Magician's Nephew. You can start with The Silver Chair. Each of these books reintroduces the whole world of Narnia from a different point of view and different perspectives, and even includes a different sort of cast of characters. You have some characters that do show up from a previous book into the next book, but they're reintroduced anyway. They're a bit older and they're in a different place. So for all that the Chronicles of Narnia is in fact a series of books, it doesn't really play by any of the rules of book series that we have in the modern day. In fact, it might even be considered avant-garde or experimental in its approach. And yet it has steady popularity and has delighted readers for generations. So again, clearly something is working here. I think one of the takeaways is simply that if you write those books as effective, enjoyable standalones, that in itself can keep readers coming to the series. You're not putting the burden on them that they have to read everything in a particular order, so they can hop in and out as they choose. And while that can be considered detrimental, you don't get series read through in the same way. You may not be able to track reader behavior by metrics. It also means that readers can just kind of hop into Narnia anytime they want to, and they can create a strong attachment to their specific favorite books. And that can be equally valid for building a fandom, and it can just make the books their own unique fun to read. So it's time for you listeners to take your stand. What is your preferred reading order for the Chronicles of Narnia? chronological order, where you're starting with The Magician's Nephew, publication order, where we're going to start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, some other kind of order. Did you hop into reading The Silver Chair with some kind of English class curriculum and then discover the rest of the books? Please share in a comment below this video on YouTube or on social media or on Substack. And thanks for joining me on this 2-part dive with 5 impossible reasons why The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe works even when it shouldn't. I'll see you next week with a quick story exploration and some quick tips, takeaways, and encouragement, so keep tuning in to Author Culture. For now, remember that your existence is fantastic. Now go forth and be awesome.